Damian Walters, thanks very much for joining me this afternoon. What's the state of play in the installation side of the bathroom market as we kind of approach the end of lockdown too?
Where do I start, Tom? Well, challenging, I think, is a fair point. The supply chain is obviously proving to be fairly difficult for the guys on the front line. And I guess there's a bit of a price to pay for those who are in the consumers' living space in terms of trying to get round solutions to fix very real problems that are being faced at the moment. But I think I'm fairly pleased that the government have allowed tradespeople to sort of continue working through this whole process, because I think had they not have, we'd be in a far more challenging position right now, not only for now, but probably for next year as well.
And that was explicit, wasn't it, both in the Prime Minister's announcements and in the subsequent advice that was given by government?
Yeah, thankfully, yes. I'm not entirely sure that if I'm critical, and I know the government have got a lot on, and I've tried not to be too critical of government at the moment, because I think we're all facing unprecedented times, and the buck stops with them, doesn't it? So, and they've got a lot of things to think about, not just one particular industry or one particular problem. So I am fairly sympathetic even when they get it wrong. But certainly from our perspective, I would have wished perhaps that they would have liaised more with organisations like ours, Tom, to be a bit more proactive around some of that messaging out, because there's still a lot of confusion out there that we're trying to wade through and clarify for stakeholders. But yeah, I think we're definitely winning the battle now, and tradespeople are a lot clearer as to what they can and can't do, thanks to that clarification that our organisations have managed to get out there.
So how have installers had to change the way that they've operated through all this pandemic in order to continue business?
Well, I think the obvious one, of course, is really the how they deliver their service within the guidelines of safe operating procedures. It's quite a lot for people to think about, and for businesses and business leaders that are fairly strategic, the delivery of a safe operating procedure wouldn't be unfamiliar ground. But for tradespeople, whilst they do operate in a safe operating procedure ordinarily in what they do, for them to face perhaps such stringent stuff in a language that they're not familiar with, on a subject that they're not familiar with, I think is fairly challenging. But that's what we're here to do, really. We're here to try and demystify all of that information that exists out there and support our members through that process of delivering their service in a safe way. The fact is, it's not easy, but then again, it's not easy for anyone, is it? So it's just something that we must face, and we must do so together, in my opinion.
Taking a bit of a step back from COVID, obviously skills in the installer base is something that we as manufacturers are really, really keen to kind of improve over years. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, obviously, if the people aren't out there to install our equipment, we're not going to sell any. Yeah. And secondly, of course, if a piece of equipment is poorly installed, then it reflects badly on our brands. So what are BiKBBI doing to try and address that skill shortage?
Well, I must admit, Tom, it's been very challenging for us this year on that subject in particular, because of course, without going over old coronavirus ground, it has really disrupted everybody, including us and our plans. We are attacking this skills gap crisis that we face, and I use the word crisis very carefully but very purposefully. We've got a problem, Tom, and the problem is really quite simple. There aren't enough people, qualified, professional installation businesses to deliver services into our customers' homes the same rate of demand. And that's really a problem that not only the UK faces, but also I think it's a global issue. And I've been fortunate enough to actually look at the skills gap, not only here in the UK, but with our new partners over in the States, with some stuff in Europe, and of course further afield in Asia. And the skills gap is very much a thing that's happened globally, but the UK is suffering in particular because of a couple of subjects. And one of those subjects is, let's get it out of the way with the coronavirus. Brexit, you know, dare I say, that was our biggest problem that we was all talking about. I mean, that seems that seems a million miles away now, that problem,
Talk
doesn't
about Brexit for a bit of light relief now, don't we?
it? It's just ridiculous, right? But all of these things, and the fact that you know, I guess this country and globally, we failed to invest in vocational learning and the promotion of vocational careers has culminated into a real problem that we face. So without shadow of a doubt, COVID to one side, the skills gap is the biggest challenge, in my opinion, and I'm bound to say that, of course. But I think it's the biggest challenge that we face, and it's for the two reasons that you've stated quite rightly. One, the ability to be able to find people to do that piece of work, and B, or two, is the fact that there are people out there that are going to do that wrong, which will reflect really badly on manufacturers and the industry as a whole. So we've got a bit of a challenge now. Our response to that is that we've got to get back to brass tacks as far as I'm concerned. And first and foremost, we've got to start looking at how we introduce and encourage school leavers to take an interest in our industry. Before the work that our industry have done collectively, because it's certainly not all BiKBBI, we couldn't possibly take credit for all of it for sure. But before the industry assembled to look at a specific apprenticeship for kitchen, bedroom and bathroom installation, or fitted interiors as it's called, the only real qualifications that you could get around apprenticeships were, you know, one of the various disciplines that kind of is involved in installation, whether that be plumbing and heating, whether that be a tiling, general carpentry, electrical course. You know, that was the route that you would go down. But of course, none of that was specific to kitchen, bedroom and bathroom installation. It was just a part of that. So that needed to be fixed. A lot of hard work put in by people before me, to be fair, people like the National Training Group when they were around, and you know, other organisations that have done a fantastic job in bringing the first part of that alive. And then, of course, our work in terms of developing an apprenticeship. And that's the bit that obviously that we've influenced, and I think we've done a very good job on. So our sort of three-pronged strategy really to support this skills gap crisis starts off with apprenticeships and the development of apprenticeships. I'm pleased to say that after a couple of years of blueprinting that in the Southeast, we've got a robust apprenticeship that we're now ready to roll out nationally. We are in the midst of reviewing the current standard of fitted interiors, working with a new working group, including some fairly big names and some fairly small businesses as well. And there's some great work being carried out there. So that review's happening. But the big thing for us is about actually getting off our backside, stop talking about it around tables and on Zoom calls, and actually getting into training providers and schools across the country to start promoting the initiative. And we've gone, and you might have seen it on social media, Tom, we've gone and bought a bloody great double-decker red bus that we're gonna cover in KBB industry apprentice type paraphernalia, and we're going to go out and just drive this thing into schools to start promoting the course. In parallel, we've been working with training providers nationally. So we believe that we're going to have a national network next year of training providers that will be essentially providing access to this apprenticeship for fitted interiors. And that will be a huge step in the right direction as far as filling that skills gap's concerned. But let's be realistic. What apprenticeships is not going to do is deliver an immediate solution to this skills gap crisis. We've got a problem now, not in 5 years when these guys become efficient. So the second part of it is working with suppliers, distributors and manufacturers on creating a portfolio of learning aids, working with organisations like the BMA, for which we've got a really good relationship that's spanned over many years now, and will continue to do so because we share a lot of visions, Tom. But we will be delivering essentially learning as part of a CPD program. So the guys and girls that are out there in the marketplace today are providing access to learning and development that helps them to fit that product in a good way, so it doesn't fall off the wall when they fit it. And then last but not least, it's the third part of this three-pronged strategy is some retraining. And that is a subject that's close to my heart as a sort of former service personnel myself, serving in the Royal Logistics Corps. There are a hell of a lot of people that are in the army that are finishing a career and thinking about a life in the civilian world that have a lot of transferable skills. And we've spoken about this before, bringing squaddies into the world so they cause less problems and, contribute to society and all that business. But I'm being a bit more brass tacks about it, Tom. And there's a lot of people in the Royal Engineers and the Royal Logistics Corps that have got a lot of transferable skills. So we're working with the Ministry of Defence and our Armed Forces Covenant that we signed earlier on this year, to work with the Ministry of Defence and the Armed Forces generally to bring as many of those over into our industry to plug some of those gaps sooner rather than later. So that's
that's a quicker fix. So we got new blood coming in the form of apprenticeships, but potentially some new blood.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ground running too.
Absolutely. So what we're looking at, the three-pronged strategy is we have a sort of medium to long-term view with the apprenticeships. You've got to start somewhere. An immediate view, which is, dealing with the people that we've got currently delivering the services in our customers' homes now. And then, of course, the immediate gap plugger, which is the retraining to bring some people in quick pace to fill some of those gaps. And, it's working, to be fair. We're doing some fantastic stuff.
You mentioned in that initial answer there about some of the shared vision that both of our organisations have got.
Yeah.
We obviously co-signed a letter to government about inclusion of water efficiency within some of the green incentive schemes.
We did.
How easy is it to get some of your members to start talking to consumers about the need to kind of think green when they're getting their bathroom installed?
Well, this is a group of people that are fairly set in their way, and their peripheral visions are, I think, they're traditionally quite narrow, and probably more so now than ever, because there's a lot of things for them to be thinking about, survival being number one. It is always going to be difficult. My view personally is that that you create the demand from the consumer. So the consumer needs to be the person that ultimately wants that product, because if they do, they create the demand, which is the incentive for the tradesperson to actually adopt this new way of thinking. Because, whatever you do in terms of green initiatives, it does require a sort of change of direction, an opening up of that peripheral vision, and perhaps even some training investment to boot as well. So there needs to be an incentive in all of that, and that usually comes down to consumer demand. What we do, so we talk to them about it regularly. We work with suppliers, distributors and manufacturers, and we'd like to do more of that with your members. Tom, is to help educate our audience in terms of the benefits of offering this green solution for consumers. And we need to be quite mindful, whilst it's it is really important that we look at the environment. And I do think actually with the announcement of the end of petrol and diesel vehicles in 2030, that I think the government are coming round to that and starting to think in that, and that's great, because I think it's important to all of us and our children and our grandchildren to boot. But I think for the immediate sort of time, we need to think about how we can potentially turn some of that green initiative into a commercial opportunity for our members. And I think if we're talking to our members about how they open up the opportunities with their customers through using green as a good conversation, you can save money by using this. You can actually do some really great stuff financially as well as ethically. Then I think that would be a really good thing that would provide that motivation for your average tradesperson these days.
So that basically you need to provide a nudge for the tradesperson to in turn provide a nudge to the consumer, and then become a virtuous circle, if you like. Well, we can carry on chipping away at government, can't we, and see where we get.
We can. I mean, this is not going to be something that we're going to solve by a press release or us jumping up and down and saying we're working together. I think that's a starting block. I think really the key to all of this is about chipping away at it, as you say. It's about educating our audiences about the benefits of, not expecting anything too quickly, but instead to embark upon a strategy that is sort of medium to long term, turning this sort of oil tanker in a sort of slowly, but firm way. And I think we can do that because, as I say, I think there's a lot of people talking about green at the moment. It's not just these protesters in central London anymore. It's just everybody's talking about it, and that's good for everybody, Tom. I'm a big fan of looking after our environment, because some of the endeavours that I've done over the years, I've actually seen the effects of climate change, with my own eyes, and it's not pretty.
So one last question before we wrap up. What if there was one thing, or perhaps two or three things, that your installer members are looking for from manufacturers, what would they be?
Well, I think practically the ability to turn around stock fairly quickly. So if something does go wrong, the ability to get stuff to site fairly quickly is fairly an emotive, an emotive reaction that you'll get from most of these guys. Very, very typically, you get the product to me on time, in full, and I'll fit it. It's where we're unable to do that for whatever reason that we kind of come into the majority of our problems. But I think actually there needs to be a different look on installations generally, Tom. The way that the industry's worked typically in the past is that there is very much this segregation between the very shiny part of the industry, the innovation around design, the creation and manufacture of great products. And there's been, some flirting with installation along the way. But I think really in order to facilitate real change, I think a lot of these manufacturers need to take installations quite seriously, because, going back to your original point, a lot of what the manufacturers does hinge on installers being available to do it correctly. So if manufacturers can get into them earlier, be that via training and development, be that via development of products, then I think that's going to be absolutely critical. And I think more so than ever, actually, Tom, I think installers are really open for it now. Once upon a time, probably not, but I think they actually want to be included within that process. And certainly something that we're doing in the apprenticeship program is that we're instilling that in the young, to get involved at a very different level. Just because you're on a fitted interiors apprenticeship is not just about fitting taps and brassware and pottery. It's actually the role that you play, the much bigger role you play within the industry. And, we're trying to instill that right away from the bottom, and the industry newcomers right away from the guys that have been doing it for 30 and 40 years. But this inclusion of bringing installers in is going to be absolutely critical for the success. And I must say, we have to think differently about how we do it as well. And we need to think about innovation, Tom, because the traditional way, and I kind of cringe almost when I hear it and see it. The traditional way for manufacturers to engage installers is a bacon butty morning. I mean, that is so 2000s, Tom. That there's got to be a better way that we do it. That doesn't mean installers need to give up days worth of work and travel across country to have their say. We've got to think outside the box.
Well, we'll carry on talking about this sort of thing, no doubt. I mean, I get a sense that there's a much closer community forming across the various different sections of the KBB industry, and long may that continue. But Definitely. There's a lot of hard work to go still.
Yeah, you know what, and I'll say it for the last time today, coronavirus has been horrible, tragic, disruptive. It's been a lot of horrible things for a lot of people. But I actually always try to take some positives, even out of the darkest of clouds. And my positive that I will take away from this is that I do feel that whilst, sorry for the cliche, but whilst we're, we're all in the same storm here, we are all in different boats. But this thing has brought us together, and there is no doubt about it. There is a willingness for more people to collaborate on getting stuff done, because I think there's a real understanding and acceptance that is probably the best way to do it. And this industry has been guilty of, sadly, in the past, working in silos. But the industry is big enough for everybody. We shouldn't be afraid of those people that are surrounded by us. And actually, we should be a lot more accepting of working together and getting this job done, because the pie is big enough for everybody, Tom. And I think the one thing that I'll take away is togetherness is definitely on the agenda more now than it ever has been.
Damian, great to catch up with you as always, and see you again soon.
Thanks for the opportunity, Tom, and wishing everybody as a decent as Christmas as possible. That's just around the corner now. So have a good one, and thanks for inviting us on this.
Cheers.